Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 47A.
I'm Kama, this is Julie. This week we start a new book. We're moving into Numbers. The Hebraic name is Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. The book of Numbers is not in order. All right, we want to know that. Book of Bamidbar. What happens in the wilderness is that 40 years, but it's not in order. So today what we discuss is actually happening the second month of the second year. But where we ended in Exodus, right? That was the first month of the second year.
Okay.
Then think about it. We basically have a month.
So we're just a month later?
Yeah, we're just a month later. This information is given because on the day we see for Exodus 40, on the day that they're trying to go into the tabernacle, it's been set up, right? And Moshe talks about, he says, and when the cloud moves, we take the tabernacle up and we move. It kind of gives that preamble of what's going to happen, okay? Well, these are the people involved with it. It's how they're going to move. These are the people who move the tabernacle, who set it up. So he's setting this up because when we go to chapter 7 and we go back again to the Exodus 40 event, we now know when he talks about the leaders drawing near. See, otherwise we'd be like, well, who are they? So he sets this up prior. So now you know all the characters and you know how they function. So when they're mentioned, you don't have to say, I wonder what that looks like. You already know. So when they move out, you've got in your head, oh, I know how they're moving out. You don't have to wonder because remember, he's a God of order. He has specific things set up so we can always see who he is. Well, what we see in this week's Torah portion is the Lord asks Moses to take a census. The Lord shows him the men that are going to lead each of the tribes. Those men didn't stand count with a pen and check them off. He collected the shekel. Each of the head of the tribes collected the shekels, and then they brought that count to Moshe. So while Moses was told to count them, it wasn't like we would do the 1, 2, 3 for people, or numbering or anything like that. God isn't really about numbers. I mean, think about it. He used Gideon with 300, right?
Right.
I mean, that's not big numbers aren't a big deal.
And faithfulness.
Yes, obedience and faithfulness. Now, what he counts here is those who are going to become the army. All right. So that one didn't mean that no one else was significant at all. But there's something special. And I feel like there's just this message in that maybe is a little deeper than what we get. Because it's those who will guard and are going to fight for Israel, who he counts. But then we see in chapter 3 that he's also counting the Levites. But he counts them separately. These they count from the age 20 and above. The Levites, they count from age 1 month, 1 new moon.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And they count all of those because they are going to be the ones who basically stand in proxy for the firstborn. If you remember in Exodus 13:2, the Lord says, all firstborns, all that break the womb, okay, those are all mine. Yet after we have the sin of the golden calf, we see that the firstborn changes. No longer is it all of Israel's firstborn that are going to stand, I guess, in representation of Israel.
So
now, the job of the Levites, okay, are to stand in place of the firstborn for all of Israel. But they too are told to guard. They guard the tabernacle itself.
Right.
So think about, within the number of those who are counted to guard, that are the army, you have those who are guarding Israel and those who are guarding the tabernacle. So even in the counted, you still have those who are more set apart. We see a few places this week where it says, don't let the stranger come near. So the Levites are told to not let a stranger come near. Well, that's not a stranger. That's anyone who's not a Levite. That's who the stranger is. Okay.
Oh.
And then we see the priests who are told to not let a stranger come near. Again, that would be anyone who's not a priest. So you have this. So Israel can draw near to here. And Levites can draw near to here. And then the priests can draw near to here. And then the high priest can draw near to here.
Yeah.
This week we have the setup of the camp, all right? The marching orders and the actual setup. Until the tabernacle was set up, they were just camping wherever. There wasn't a set order. Once they had a center, once they had something that they all were to guard, they all were to be involved in, and they all had equal share in, okay? Now it was okay to now set them up into their jobs. Because see, everyone's job is focused on that center. Right. So we know they all agree that in the center is the tabernacle. Then right outside the door of the tabernacle was Moses and Aaron and the priest, who were to guard the way in. Doesn't that make sense? Then around it were all the Levites, and they were separated into 3 groups. The 3 sons of Levi that came into Egypt are the 3 clans that are the way it's broken down. Then when you move outside of that, now where you used to just have people living wherever, they're now going to move into their clans, their tribes. So you have a tribe, and in the tribe you have the brothers who, the multiple children, and then their clans. So when they set the camps up, you have your 4 sides. You have your north, south, east, and west. And each of those cardinal directions had one main tribe that 2 others were under. So it would be 3 tribes per, because remember there's 12 tribes. And the Levites, we know they're not included because they're inside the middle, all right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the east side. The east side is where the door is, okay? It's facing the tabernacle. The east camp banner was under Judah. And then with Judah was Issachar and Zebulun. And it says that Issachar was next to, but when it talks about Zebulun, it just says Zebulun's there. It doesn't say where, okay? So the thought, you'll see some who say, well, it lined up like, okay, here's the center, and then it lined up long, making a cross. So when you have the numbers, because remember, specific numbers are given with how many are in the tribes for each side of it. That would make a longer side, and then we have at the top, which would have been the west side, you would have had the tribe under Ephraim. Right. That's the smallest group, because that was Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. Then what you have on the south and the north side are very similar in number, very close. All right. So some say that actually in Numbers, when Balak looks out, okay, and Balaam look out, that they actually see a large cross.
Yeah.
Absolutely could be. The only thing that sometimes makes me go, is that would mean that if they lined up where it went Judah, Issachar, and then under that, Zebulun, that's really far. Because remember, there was over 600,000 counted, and that was not including the Levites, okay? Mm-hmm. Now you put the children and the wives, okay, we're talking about 2 to 3 million people. Well, you put 2 to 3 million people, you divide them into 4, and you start going away from the tabernacle. That's really far. So when each of the heads of the camps called out to call their men, do you realize how far away that has to travel for them to come back? So I like the cross idea. I'm not debunking that. It could be. Another thought process literally would have gone side by side and then in length. Mm-hmm. So you would have had columns instead of back to back, being butted up against each other. So you would have had Judah, then Issachar, and then Zebulun, which again shows, because there's no next to, that those 2 are not next to each other. There's somebody in between. Okay. Mm-hmm. On the west side, behind them, as said before, you have the camp of Ephraim. That's Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. Those are all Rachel's children. The east side were all Leah's children. The sides, the side of Dan, which is the north side, which is Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, those are all the 2 concubines' wives. The south side is Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. Whenever the cloud lifted, it was time to go. The camp of Judah with his 3 would go first. Then you would have the camp of Reuben, and then they would go. Then you would have the Levites. Then you would have Ephraim, and then you would have Dan. In the middle are the pieces of the tabernacle. So what we basically have at all times, anytime that tabernacle is either set up or traveling, you have the same 4 faces around the throne, okay, of God, as we see in Revelation, as we see in Ezekiel. So we have the ox, that would be with Ephraim, that's the west side. Mm-hmm. You have the lion, that's obviously with Judah, okay, and that's the east side. You have it's debated, the eagle, who is on the side of the north, and some will say that was changed to a serpent later, because on his flag it has a serpent with an eagle. And on the south side, we have the man. Again, these are all the faces that you see around the throne of God. These are also all the faces, the characteristics in which our Messiah had. He was the ox, which is the servant. He was the lion. He will be the lion, right? The king. Mm-hmm. He came as the man. Yes. And then the eagle, as they would say, basically represents what John talks about, the God, right? The spiritual aspect of understanding him as
the deity.
The deity. Let's go back to the way the camp is set up, because I wanted to talk about the Levites real quick. And this is also how they move out. But you have the Levites around, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the east part, we talk about Moses and Aaron and his kids, the priests. Then on the sides, these groups have specific jobs, all right? Yeah. On the back side, the west side, which is actually the closest to the Holy of Holies. Gershon was on the west side, okay? They took care of the outside of the tent, the skin of the tabernacle, okay? Then on the two sides, you had Merari, who took care of the bones and the structure. And then you had on the other side, Kehath, who took care of basically the guts, okay? That's the heart. Took care of all the furnishings. The priest, they had to really guard, Gareth. They were told to go in and cover. So each of the things that they would carry, the Levites, remember, they don't go in, they're not priests. They had the responsibility and the privilege to carry these things when walking, but they did not see them. When we see the pictures of them carrying the ark, or we see the pictures of any of the pieces in a march, that is not scriptural. The Lord gave
that only happened when their enemies did
That's
that.
right. That's only. So when you see that, actually, I think the Vatican has a frieze of it, of them taking the things from the temple and bringing it to Rome. Okay, fine. They're not covered. That's not their job. Remember, the world can get away with a lot of things, but not his kids.
That's right.
He gave the rules for his kids. The priests are to go in and they cover the ark, okay, with blue. I love this. Because if you can think a little bit past just the materials, but think about how it might represent Messiah coming in the flesh, you can really see how each one of those furnishings do represent his heart.
Oh, you know what that makes me think of? Noah. Because you have Canaan, who uncovered him. He was the evil one.
Yes.
And then you have the other two sons who are the blessed.
Yes.
And they covered his nakedness.
They did what they were supposed to do.
It's like that's God's nakedness.
Yes. And
it's just out for everybody to see.
Oh my gosh. So they kept Leviticus 19, which is be holy for I'm holy.
Yes.
And here's the thing, you cover the nakedness, right? That's in 18 and 19.
Yes.
They cover the, oh my gosh, yeah, that's really good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So now we see where he's saying, please cover my insides, my private parts, right? And we see the first thing that the ark is covered with is leather, like skin. Ooh. And then
Yeshua.
Yeah, Yeshua.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And then it's covered with blue. All right. So when they carry it, and then they put the poles in it. Right, deity. So he came as flesh and deity together. Carrying the ark.
Ooh, and isn't blue the representation of actually walking out the Torah?
Oh my gosh, yes it is.
It is.
Yes it is. Because
I learned that from 119 Ministries.
Then the table, what we see, is it's covered in blue, and then its utensils are wrapped in scarlet red, the blood, and put on top, and then covered in leather.
Oh.
So now we have the deity with the red, right? The actual flesh. Remember, he dies for us.
Yes.
Eat this bread, right? Eat all of me. Take this drink, or the blood. This is my blood. Okay, that's right there on the tabernacle, on the table. It's the deity with the blue, and then the red, and then the leather. Because
everything he did was giving us just a deeper meaning of Torah. I mean, oh my gosh. Yes. We just have eyes to see and ears to hear.
That's why knowing Torah redefines everything else in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament.
Yes. I mean, how many times you hear something and you're like, oh, that reminds me of.
Yes, exactly.
So you know that Yeshua, while he was teaching,
that's what they were supposed to be doing.
They were supposed to be going, oh, that reminds me.
Right. Then we have the lamp, okay, the menorah. And it's only covered in blue, that's all. Well, you're light of the world. You're supposed to be the light. How? By doing
the commandments.
That's what makes you
that's
the
why
light.
it's in blue.
Right.
Got it. Get it? Good.
Then we have the golden altar, which is also covered in blue, and its utensils are covered with the leather, and then it's covered with the leather, and then carried. So think about this. Think about this procession. You see blue, you see leather, leather, blue. All right. You don't see the instruments. The only time you got to see them was when they actually were making them in Exodus, when they were forming it and participating. Other than that, it was a story either being shared by the priest or those family members that were involved with it. Now, I mean, they had artwork and stuff like that, don't get me wrong, but you still who had firsthand knowledge was very limited. Then we have the altar, which is covered. The altar itself is covered in purple, which is that kingly,
the altar outside.
The altar outside, yes.
Yeah.
And then the utensils are put on. Then we have it with leather again, because he is our living sacrifice.
Yes.
He was our living sacrifice. He was the sacrifice in that leather. He could only do it.
That's why
in
our skin's
his
like leather.
Yeah, in our bodily form. That's the only way he could do it. He had to come as one of us. First Adam, second Adam, right?
Right.
So anyway, you can go dig around. You can find that through the book of Numbers. You will find where there's these little messages.
All through the Bible.
Yeah, through the Bible. But there's a lot this whole
Numbers.
book. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you have a fabulous week, and we will see you on the flip side with Julie and the Brit Hadashah.
Shalom.